There's a problem within the privacy community. The refusal to call out a creator whose motives have become questionable or outright hypocritical to their platform. A creator that claims neutral reporting but has steadily incorporated more hot takes. A creator that promotes discussion while censoring their own comment sections or outright ignoring them on other platforms. The same creator that complains about toxic community members while simultaneously antagonizing commenters with snarky or condescending remarks. The creator in question is none other than Henry from Techlore and Surveillance Report. It wasn't very long ago that people started to question Henry's news reporting style. During the whole DuckDuckGo censorship controversy, Henry made it a point to address these concerns by adding a short PSA to the beginning of an episode of Surveillance Report.
First, we want to outline that our goal is to offer you weekly news, and that's it. We don't want to inject how we feel about each service and swing people towards our personal preferences. That's just not our goal. We want you to have news. It's called the Surveillance Report and not the Sensational Surveillance Podcast. This is also why when we cover Facebook and Google and all of these extreme companies that we don't really like, we still do our best to strictly cover the story and to move on, even for these companies that we don't like. So we still hold our tongue on pretty much every story for the sake of trying to be as neutral as possible. Occasionally we'll add this personal commentary. Sometimes we'll talk about stories and how it impacts us, or we might tie it to something else to kind of tell a broader story if we find it relevant. But even then, we try to be neutral with stories, and we actually cut a lot of the discussions and commentary out before we publish these. So we have a lot more commentary during the recordings, but they don't make it to the final thing. Now, we're not perfect. I'm not saying we're perfectly neutral, but we're just saying that's our goal, and we feel that we're trying to stick to it very well. Finally, this doesn't necessarily represent our individual channels. Nathan has The New Oil and I have Techlore, and sometimes we do actually talk about our personal takes on things, but here on Surveillance Report on this channel, we try to be neutral.
Despite what Henry said, however, subsequent episodes up to present day have told a very different story.
Just to add on to this, your probably monthly reminder that Telegram does not have end-to-end encryption by default, and is not something we generally recommend to people unless they understand the limitations involving that. And I want to throw in here, Telegram actually has a transparency report. They call it a transparency report. But do you know what it is? It's just a chat. It's like a Telegram chat. It's a channel with no messages in it from 2018. So it's just an empty Telegram channel that they call a transparency report that doesn't talk about any of these cases that we're talking about. This is not a transparency report.
That's what makes it a transparency report, is it is transparent. There's nothing there.
Exactly. It's just really funny to me because people like unironically will, and I have no issue saying this, people unironically like shut down Apple, but at least Apple has like a transparency report where they're actually very transparent about the information they give to governments. And then those people will complain about Apple on Telegram, which isn't even willing to come forward and be like, okay, yeah, we gave up this information in this case here. My takeaway today is use services that are proven. Signal is proven to collect almost nothing. There have been actual court documents that have been released to the public that show they were almost able to give nothing. Not even your phone number, nothing. If you're just grounded and looking at the evidence around you, why are you going to ever trust what Telegram has to say when they can't maintain a transparency report with things that they haven't been able to keep up on? At least with these big tech companies, at least you know for a fact they're not being private, because you can look at their transparency reports. Because
yeah, they don't care. They'll say it in there because they know nobody reads it.
Exactly. Like Telegram's in the worst position. This is very opinionated, by the way, so I apologize. Like we covered the fact-based story, but this is getting more opinions here. This is, in my opinion, like the worst place to be. You have something that's claiming to be private, claiming to be transparent, and provides nothing to like verify that information that they're giving you. So it's a huge false sense of privacy, which the big tech companies do too. But at least if you bother to read through their privacy policy, you'll learn really quickly they're not. But Telegram doesn't have that as an option. You have to listen to Surveillance Report to know that. While I'm curious to hear Nate's thoughts here. I think we both probably address these are probably positive steps in the right direction. We both probably think that this whole industry just can't possibly rely or thrive on in a private way. I don't know. I don't know what to say here, but I'm skeptical of Facebook ever being a private service.
That's what I was going to say. Like, honestly, I just distrust Facebook through and through. Like, they could cure cancer, and I'd wonder what the catch is. So I'm with you, and yeah, I agree with you. I don't think, at least not at this scale, I don't think these ad tech companies can exist privately. I'm sure that private advertising can be done, but just not the same. Like, if it were done, Meta and Google and all those other advertisers would not look anything like they do today, I don't think.
The surveillance report has become increasingly full of sensationalism, including lengthy opinionated rants.
Okay, so my opinions, I think this is a disaster. I think this is a terrible move. I accept that SMS is terrible. I'm not arguing that for a second. I'm not saying SMS is good. I even accept the whole like accidental messenger charges. You know, I found out recently, thanks to surveillance report and our listeners, that in a lot of parts of the world, SMS is not free. Like here in the US and Canada and probably parts of Europe, like SMS it's been free for a long time. At this point, pretty much the only thing you pay for on a cell plan is data. My argument is, why don't you fix the UI? Like, if people keep getting confused, make your UI better. Maybe this is like an anecdotal logical fallacy, but like, I personally know a lot of people on iOS who don't use Signal, or like they downloaded it for like a week and then deleted it because they don't like managing 2 messengers. And I know in other parts of the world, it's like, well, we already have 10 messengers. We have Line and WhatsApp and Telegram and this and that and the other. We're totally used to it. Again, not all parts of the world are like that. And, you know, I try to be sensitive to the fact that the US is not the whole world, and the world does not revolve around the US like America seems to think we do. I try to respect that fact, but it kind of goes both ways too. Like, yes, I accept that in other parts of the world, having 10 messengers is the norm and you guys are totally used to it. And I think what's going to end up happening, in my personal opinion, is that's been a major selling point for me to get people on Signal, especially if they have an Android, is like, hey, you can set it as your default messenger and you'll get both Signal and SMS. It'll automatically upgrade the message. So I think what's going to end up happening here is, because a lot of people are like, well, this is going to push people off SMS. No, it's not. I think what's going to happen is most people are just going to end up deleting Signal because they don't want to manage 2 messengers. The new president of Signal straight up said in another article that Signal has no plans of dropping the phone number requirement. Like, yes, they're planning to roll out usernames, allegedly, someday before Jesus comes back. They've straight up said, like, Signal is still going to require a phone number in order to fight spam. So you'll be able to use usernames instead of giving people your phone number, which is great, but there's no dropping the phone number requirement, just to clarify that. I keep hearing people say that, and that's not going to happen. And then the last thing I wanted to say is, like I said, I've seen a lot of people like, well, I'm going to delete Signal. For the record, as pissed off as I am about this, I don't think this is a good reason to abandon Signal. It's still like the best secure messenger out there. There's almost no metadata. We've seen that repeatedly proven in court. We've seen that proven in like Vault 7 CIA leaks. But I do feel like this is really trending into like Mozilla territory, where they just don't listen to their users. They already deleted SMS import. Now they're getting rid of SMS entirely. They still haven't rolled out usernames despite literal years of waiting for that. Plus there was the whole mobile coin incident. Like, yeah, I feel like they're definitely not listening to their users, and I don't like this move at all. I think it's going to push people further away from Signal and make Signal adoption even harder on Android. What's your counterpoint?
Well, no, I think you definitely bring up a lot of good points. The UI UX thing, I think, is overall an interesting point for them to make, because that is user error on their, not user error, but that's like a development error on their end.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if it's confusing for people,
then you should have done a better job designing it.
Yeah, exactly. Like iMessage, for example, I disagree with the iMessage implementation, which is done almost as a way to incentivize iMessages over SMS.
I've heard that some people treat it as like a clout thing. Like, if you have the blue bubbles, like, you suck. You're not in the friend circle.
And that's intentional design on Apple's part. So I don't think, that's why I don't agree with that. But it's very obvious when you're using the Messages app on an iPhone if it's SMS or not SMS. And it's not hard to be able to recreate that. I also like how it's a selling point to keep messages in the same place. So that is always, for me, also been a good selling point.
I've
like, you can just keep
definitely been able to like get people more interested in Signal because of that before. Like, hey, do you use Android? And they're like, yeah, like, check it out. You can make them a 2-in-1. You don't have to have an extra app on your phone. It's exactly the same. It just has more functionality.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing too is that there actually are, these aren't discussed as much, but there actually are a couple perks to using even SMS on Signal. The first one is Signal, the way that Signal handles messages at rest is still better than most default SMS applications. which is a bummer that like now I guess you probably won't get that perk anymore. And the other thing too is the actual features built into Signal. Some of them carry over into SMS. So for example, a Giphy search on Signal is like everything's proxied, and like all your Giphy searches and all that stuff is done very privately. And if you're using another default messenger for SMS, like yes, the threat model for SMS doesn't really call for this kind of stuff, but it's still cool to know that all the features around the messages are still done in a more private and secure way. And things like disappearing messages, while it's not going to delete on the other person's end, you can still enable disappearing messages on Signal for SMS. So there's little things like that I think actually are nice. It's going to be really sucky to lose those. So like those are all like the things that I'm also upset about for them removing this. Before I go into like why I think it could be a good decision, I did want to clarify the username thing, because that's a very like misunderstood thing for people. I don't think Signal's ever going to remove the phone number requirement. That's like the whole point of Signal is to replace things like SMS. That's the point of Signal. In order to do that, in this day and age, everything is phone number based. That's the way people communicate. If you meet some new person on the street, you're either asking them for a social media handle or you're asking them for a phone number. You don't ask for their email, and you don't ask them for their session ID. So like everything right now is based on the phone number, and I think Signal's going to stay that way, for better or for worse. And even with username support, you're still probably going to be able to add people with a phone number if you have their phone number, just like most other platforms that do this kind of thing. There might be a way for you to disable that, but I'm sure they're going to want people to keep that enabled. And on that note, I actually think that usernames, if this is going to be like Telegram where you sign up with a phone number and then use usernames, I think that solves a majority of the problems with the phone number requirement. Because that's my biggest issue with it. I don't know about you, Nate, but I just don't want to give my phone number to people just to add me on Signal. That's why, like on my personal site, it says email me for my Signal number, because I'm not just gonna publish my Signal number for the world to see. Like that's my biggest problem with the phone number requirement.
Yeah, especially in parts of the world where your phone number is tied to your ID and you can't get a VoIP number. Yeah, it's a huge drawback.
Yeah, so like I still wish there was no phone number requirement, but at the same time, this resolves the main thing. And they did give a date. They said no later than late 2023 for that. So we're gonna hold that.
I'll believe that when I see it.
I know. Well, that's the first time we've ever actually gotten a date. So I actually want to be optimistic, because a lot of it is coming soon. Someday we'll have usernames. We're moving in that direction, but like we actually have a formal date, late 2023. So we'll see what happens there. Sorry, okay, now to actually address why I think this could be good. One thing that was really interesting is I tweeted something kind of as a joke. People who use Signal on Android, there's something called an insight score that pretty much tells you how many of your messages are sent through Signal, end-to-end encryption. So like if 90% of your messages on Signal are sent with Signal users, then you're gonna have an insight score of 90%. And I tweeted something and I was like, the whole purpose of this is to get people like myself on 100% on Android, just so I could have a perfect score. And this actually led to me opening up the blog article about insights. And I actually encourage people to do this. Go type in Signal Messenger insight score and look at their blog post on this. There's an iOS section that says Signal protocol automatically protected 100% of your messages. All communication on Signal is private. Desktop. Signal protocol automatically protected 100% of your messages. All communication on Signal desktop is private. Then there's the Android section. And it's like this whole nuanced answer of like, there's a percentage of like what's SMS and MMS and note signals are moving. Like, it's all messy. And so I actually see value from a them perspective of being able to just say like, on all of our platforms, if you use our platform, there is no question that you are using end-to-end encryption and that you are private and secure. They can't do that right now. And I think this blog article really speaks to that, because on Android, it's like, here's this nuanced answer and you have to know how to use the Android app properly to just have basic security. So that's my first, like, I kind of get that from their perspective. And the other thing too, like, I really want to see, this might be the only thing they're not sharing with us right now in their blog post, it's RCS. So RCS is the new thing Google's trying to roll out in a lot of cell carriers, and Google hasn't actually rolled out an API yet for developers to implement RCS into their apps. And so it's possible that Signal has dropped SMS and eventually they're going to add RCS, but they just don't have any API to work with to integrate it yet. And RCS, by the way, is supposed to have support for end-to-end encryption. And so I could see Signal adding RCS in the future, but why they wouldn't share that now is beyond me. And I don't know if there's something that I'm not aware of, but that's just something that I was going to throw out there. This was written on the wall for a while with a lot of decisions they were making the last year regarding how they were handling SMS, especially the removal of import backward.
Yeah, like looking back on it, I see that, and it's like, oh, this was building up to this. But at the time, obviously, I had no idea. But looking back on it, it's like, oh, cool.
Yeah, that's why I think like the RCS stuff could be interesting too, especially when you see things like Signal being demoed in Google keynotes. I'm like, is Google really demoing a different messenger in like their own keynote when Google already has like 5 of their own? So I just think things like that are interesting. And then RCS utilizes Signal's encryption. For people who don't know that and haven't read the Google white paper on how their RCS end-to-end encryption works. So Google Messages, if you use it, actually uses Signal's encryption. So my guess is there's some kind of communication that we don't know about, and they're hoping to roll RCS into Signal, but that's just my theory.
All right, anything else?
No. I think, let people definitely leave their comments, because I think this is going to be a hot one.
Oh boy. I already know everyone's going to tell me I'm wrong and SMS is terrible and literally anything is an improvement over SMS, so whatever.
I don't know. I feel like our audience is going to be more like, well, screw Signal just altogether for even requiring a phone number.
You guys weren't hard enough on Signal.
Yeah, it's interesting, like the hate, where it depends where the hate comes from, because if it's on YouTube, I think that audience tends to be more like, I can't believe you're even acknowledging Signal as a messenger altogether because it requires a phone number. But then if you go on Matrix, it's going to be like, I can't believe that you would question them for trying to remove any insecure protocol.
I got that on Twitter a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah, Twitter was like SMS is terrible. Like how those people that are always like email purists, like everyone should just stop using email. Like that's even a remotely feasible suggestion right now. And they're just like, oh, SMS is terrible. Like anything to make SMS less popular. It's like, but that's my thing is, again, not to sound like a broken record, that's not what's going to happen. People are just going to delete Signal and go back to using SMS.
These clear labels for opinionated sections are largely absent, and the viewer is stuck sitting through the opinionated rant.
We still do our best to strictly cover the story and to move on, even for these companies that we don't like. So we still hold our tongue on pretty much every story for the sake of trying to be as neutral as possible.
It seems very not well thought out.
Well, is there any negative implication? I mean, like, this isn't inherently privacy invasive. It's just a classification for the business you shopped at. Is there something I'm not seeing there?
I think, how can I say this without being political?
Because, like, no one's complaining that, like, where they eat, and if they go to, like, a doctor's office and use their credit, they don't care about, like, all of those data points. So why is this different than that? Like, I'm asking.
No. I think that's a good question, and I think it comes down to, we always talk about potential abuses in the future. Like, I'm a firm believer that, and maybe this is a conspiracy theory, I hope I'm wrong, but I think in the future, our purchase data is going to be used to determine things like health insurance. Like, if you're going to the grocery store and you're constantly buying, like, beer and cookies, I think eventually that data is going to be shared with health insurance providers, and they're going to jack up your premiums because they know you're not eating healthy. And I think this is the same thing. If there ever were some kind of crackdown on firearms in the US, I think things like this make it easier to crack down on those people. Or even just like political data, like who generally shops at gun stores? Right-leaning people and people who vote more on the conservative side of the spectrum. So if there's ever a data breach, they could use that to like target people of a certain political persuasion. So
this story makes me just mad though, because all the purchase data is like, this is relevant to any issue, not just guns. So this is like a response to
it really is.
Now,
you're right.
This now impacts me, so now I want to talk about it and talk about the privacy implications. That's kind of what makes me mad about this, because the NRA doesn't ever talk about privacy, but now that it affects possible like collection of gun information, now it's relevant. So I think what I'm getting at here is, for me, what this story speaks to is that people only give a damn about privacy when it impacts them and their cause. And we're trying to get people away from that, and that's why I get frustrated by comments when we say things that are generally for the pro-privacy, regardless of political preference. And people are like, I can't believe you defended XYZ when they said XYZ 3 years ago. And it's like, we don't care. Like, we do say when we are getting political and inserting a personal thought, but this is like literally what we don't want to do, I think, back here, is like, oh, now our political preference is being impacted in a privacy invasive way, so I want to speak up about privacy because it's going to impact me. So
And that's, for the record, that's why I mentioned, like, regardless of whether you're pro-gun or anti-gun, I think we can all agree this is riddled with loopholes and problems. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It unfortunately, like, I had one person call me, you can cut this if you want or keep it in. I had one person call me one time because they were like, hey, my accountant messed up the address and now my tax information is getting delivered like 3 houses down and I don't know my neighbor, I don't trust my neighbor, what should I do? And I'm just like, I've been trying to get you to use a password manager for like 3 years and now all of a sudden you care. Like, yeah, I see it all the time in my personal life. People that like previously didn't care about privacy, as soon as something happens, they're just like, oh God, now I care. And on the one hand, it's like, yay, now you care. But also like, damn, dude, where were you 3 years ago when I was trying to tell you?
Yep. People just don't, I
agree.
mean, and this applies to when the opposite political party takes presidency, and now you're like, oh, they're gonna take over the country and they're gonna invade our homes. I need to protect everything. And it's like, why? Why
didn't you feel that way before?
Why exactly? Like, this is all about prepping. And same thing when the Roe v. Wade stuff happens. Now everyone's like, oh crap, gun stuff. Oh crap. Like, we have too many oh crap moments. People just need to be more proactive. And I know I'm just probably
preaching
reflecting most people's views on this who listen to this podcast, but it's just frustrating and I'm just venting. So
Now, I'm not saying they can't share their opinions on these stories, but if they're going to do so while still claiming to be neutral, then maybe they should create a whole separate B-roll video for that, and not inject it into every single surveillance episode.